In this video, we're going to be tying a fantastic, generic, template-style emerger pattern. Now, while I'm actually going to be tying this in the form of a UK's March Brown, this pattern can be easily adapted, tweaked, and changed in shape and size to imitate any emerging upwing, including the Danica mayfly. Now, thanks to the inclusion of CdC throughout this pattern, this will be highly buoyant and visible, and it will hold up its own even in those faster, more broken waters. Now, in terms of fishing, I normally tend to fish this pattern where the trout are stacked up, generally during March Brown time, and in those hatches, they will focus on the emerging upwings as they come out of that faster, more broken water where, of course, the nymphs like to live. And it's in those slower waters that the trout will be stacked up, forming a gauntlet where every single emerger and March Brown needs to run in order to emerge into that nice, pretty upwing. So make sure you've got a couple of these patterns in your fly box. I certainly gravitate to these every year, and I fish them throughout the season as well. So without further ado, let's get into the materials. Firstly, the hook. You might remember this hook model from my previous video, which covered the Klinkhammer Special. Fulling Mill's Living Lava Hook is a superbly strong model, perfect for those early season and potentially bigger fish. It also gives me the extended hook shank length I prefer when tying this style of emerger. So the curved design allows the pattern to sit in the surface film, replicating the emerging insect's trapped persona. When tying a March Brown imitation, the naturals here in South Wales can be a little on the large side, certainly one of the biggest upwings on the river throughout the year, so I opt for a size 12 hook. This is the go-to size for my waters, but feel free to size accordingly to mimic the naturals in your home waters. Next, the thread, and as usual, I opt for the strength and denier of 18/0 nano silk. Colour-wise, as always, I use white, but this usually takes on the colour of the materials it's being tied over. As such, the end result here, when the thread is wet, is a drab olive effect. In terms of materials, for the shuck, I'm using two materials, specifically Fulling Mill's Polyon, here in the tan offering, but I also like to add a little flash in the form of pearl crystal flash. The body and the thorax will be comprised of Fulling Mill's Eco Warrior dubbing, specifically in the pepperbox colour. This has all the goodness afforded to us by a mix of soft rabbit and hare's-ear, along with those desirable spikier guard hairs. Both of these materials aid in giving the pattern its buggy profile and enable us to tie with an easy-to-use material when forming our dubbing noodles. For the rib, and from a simplicity standpoint, I've opted to use simply thread, here in yellow. As a trout-obsessed angler, I don't have many threads thicker than a 12/0, so it's easily fixed by simply folding one piece of thread twice, resulting in 4 strands. If you've some 6/0 or 4/0 threads, feel free to use. When the rib takes on water, it'll enhance the pattern with a drab yellow effect. We'll also add to the pattern's noisiness and overall footprint by incorporating CdC feather fibres into the thorax. We'll do this by inserting the fibres of one side of a CdC feather into a split thread, spinning and wrapping openly through the thorax. For this, I use a Mark Pettigen CdC Bulldog style clip. By simply placing one side of a CdC feather into the clip, trim off the feather's stem or rachis, and then from there the fibres can then be easily inserted into a split thread. Finally, for our wing and thorax cover, we'll utilise 3 CdC feathers. This will give us maximum buoyancy, and even in noisier, more flecked waters, the wing can be seen fairly easily, even at a distance. Okay, so with the materials out of the way, let's get into the tying. So, first of all, I've mounted my hook in the vise, I've crimped the barb, and then I've just gone on with my 18/0 thread before I cut the tag. Once cut, I'm going to take the thread all the way down to the curve of the hook. And once we're at the curve of the hook, I'm going to take my shuck material and just place that on top of the hook shank, tie in with a couple of wraps, and then in a moment I'm going to take one piece of crystal flash and lay that directly on top of the shuck material. And once tied in, I'm going to take my thread all the way to the thorax area. So we're ready for the rib. For this, as I mentioned earlier, we take 4 strands effectively of our 12/0 thread, this one being yellow, and I'm going to tie that in at the base of the thorax and then wrap back to the curve of the hook. Hopefully you can see how quick and easy this pattern is already. We're already at the point where we're tying in the body, and for that I've taken my dubbing material, I've created the dubbing noodle, and I'm going to take that all the way up to the rear end of the thorax. So if, like me, in this section you feel you need to add a little bit more in the way of a taper, then absolutely you can. Feel free to add a pinch more dubbing and then build up that taper. Now we're ready for the rib. And for that, I'm going to take my 4 strands of tying thread. I'm going to twist this really tight so that gives us extra durability in the fly. And I'm going to place that in my hackle pliers. Then when I'm ready, I'm going to create a nice open rib all the way up to the rear of the thorax. Once the rib is complete, I've snipped the tag end and I've just gone on with my scissors just to clean up the body slightly. Then I'm going to take my shuck material and trim to length. For this, it's about half the length of the body. Right, we're almost there. Next up is the wing. Now this is also going to form part of the thorax as well, so we need to size this accordingly. For this, I let it trail past the shuck slightly, so that when I bring it forward, it will be sized exactly as I need. But of course, if you need a little bit more control or you need to alter the wing, simply just add, as I'm doing, a few loose wraps, and then you can draw through and size exactly to fit the pattern. So when happy, we'll secure the wing in place and then snip off the butt ends. So with the butt ends trimmed, I've covered them with a layer of thread, and I've just taken my thread to the rear of the thorax, created a dubbing noodle, and I've brought that forward to behind the eye and then back again to form a nice sized thorax, and then I'll park the thread at the top of the wing. Next, I'm going to split my thread. This is going to allow us to insert the CdC fibers that I've placed into a plastic bulldog clip. And once I release the bulldog clip, this then can be respun. So we're respinning the thread nice and tight so that it displays those CdC fibers. And once we've splayed those CdC fibers nicely, we're going to wrap through the thorax in nice wide open turns and parking the thread behind the eye. Lastly, for the thorax, we just need a bit more spikiness. So if we feel the need for that, we're going to take our dubbing brush and just tease out those fibers, brushing downwards. So our final move. Lastly, we're going to take the CdC feather wing. We're going to bring those forward over the eye and then tie down with 3 strong turns before taking the thread behind the eye and under the wing, and then whip finishing. So there we have it, a generic template style upwing emerger that, even though I've tied this in the form of the UK's March Brown, can easily be adapted to imitate any emerging upwing. So hopefully you found this interesting, helpful. Please do let me know how you get on in the comment section below. And of course, if you'd like to like and subscribe, then of course that helps this video get out to the wider YouTube audience. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.